So I'm really excited to have you both on here today. It has been said that, and I said this at the beginning of the show, that Martin Hayes is the best fiddle player on the planet, and I'm sure you've heard that said, Martin. How does that make you feel?
Well, I ignore it completely.
You do.
I've forgotten what you just said. I have to ignore that because it isn't true to begin with.
But it's a high compliment.
Well, it's a high compliment, yeah, for sure. I do appreciate that.
And that's modest Martin Hayes, and we also have Dennis Cahill. What if I said you were the best guitar player on the planet?
I'd try and get it published in the New York Times.
Oh, I see.
Collect as many royalties as I could.
Now, so perhaps you can tell that Dennis hails from Chicago, Illinois, USA, and Martin is from Germany, right? No, Ireland.
Sure, yeah, Ireland, yeah, exactly.
How did you two meet up with each other?
Well, I moved to Chicago in 1985. I've lived in the U.S. for many, many years also. And it turns out that I had a little tour with some musicians, and the last gig was in Chicago. And I was staying in a hotel, kind of motel or something near the venue. And when the venue finished, it was a week-long engagement. Then the rest of us said, hey, maybe we'll stay in Chicago. Okay, so let's get an apartment. So we walked. We didn't have a car. We walked and got an apartment somewhere. And it turns out it was kind of across the road from Dennis. Now, I didn't know that at the time, but later on, when I was visiting some of the clubs in Chicago and places where we ended up playing, I ran into him and I heard him playing. So I've known him since known him since 85, something like that. So we go back a while.
Is that the correct version of things?
Yeah, actually.
Okay. How about a tune? And then I want to talk more about your music.
Okay, no problem. This is a tune by a friend of ours, Pedro Rieda. It's called Fiaura.
Completely lovely. Thank you, Martin Hayes and Dennis Cahill. So, Martin, when you first came to the States, what, was this around the 80s?
Yeah, it was
or so?
the 80s, yeah.
So what kind of music were you, when you started playing publicly, what kind of music were you playing? Were you doing traditional Irish?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up kind of in a family where of traditional Irish musicians, largely. My father was a pretty well-known fiddle player, and so was my uncle, and I had other uncles who played flutes and accordions, and my dad had a band as well, so there were lots of musicians coming through the house. And so I grew up pretty much immersed in this particular form of music. So when I came to Chicago, this was basically all I knew how to play.
And yet I read, which I didn't know before I read this just the other day, that you and Dennis after you got together musically, that you formed a jazz fusion band.
Well, it'd be a loose term for it. I mean, like I was playing traditional Irish music and I was trying to figure out how to improvise. I was trying to figure out, how to make my thing fit with other things, or how to bend the thing I was doing so that it would work with other styles and influences, So it was kind of a journey like that, I don't know if we ever got to the end of that journey, but we certainly had fun in the efforts of trying to fuse all these things and trying to take the shackles off as well and just be completely free and allow whatever wanted to happen, musically.
What would you call what you did what was the name of the group? The Midnights?
Court.
The Midnight Court.
I mean, what we find is that in going back into Irish traditional music, if you go really back into the roots and guts feeling of this music, you end up with something that's actually quite universal in musical terms, and something that's a little more different than one would expect, And as with all forms of music, I'm of the belief that these things should be able to openly speak to anybody, whether they're initiated in this or not, it should function well as a language. So we do our best to speak the emotional language of the music, more than anything, and our experience has been that we do make that connection with audiences.
How about another tune?
Sure. Okay. Will we do Boney? Yeah.
That is really, really beautiful. What's the name of that?
It's two tunes combined there. The very first one was one called Boney Crossing the Alps. It's a tune written in Ireland, maybe in the Napoleonic times. It was for Napoleon. And the second tune is a more recent composition by a good friend of ours, Pedro Rieda again. And that one is called Cahill an Solas, which means where is the light. So that's what it was.
So, Dennis, you come from an Irish family, an Irish-speaking family in Chicago?
Yep. They were from the Dingle Peninsula, actually, around Ballydavid. But they never taught us Irish at all. It was that period where you came and they wanted you to be American as possible. So.
But they spoke Irish to each other?
Especially when they were talking about.
About their kids, right?
Dumb things we would do.
Yeah, dumb things that kids do. Well, can we get one more tune out of it?
We'll play something a little livelier, so maybe two reels. The first one is called The Road to Cahill, and the second one is called The Toss of Feathers.
Oh, fantastic. That is really, really great. Well, thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Martin, for taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having us.